bring in Ricardo so that we can give him the floor. We're so excited about this.
So Ricardo, you are Chief Engineer of Open Source and Cloud Native at Boeing. So we are very excited about this talk. Excited to have you here. And Ricardo, I had the privilege of sitting with you at KubeCon, listening to some of you, some of your thoughts on Cloud Native and open source. So super excited to hear what you have to say this morning.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And it was a blast talking to you. I'm looking forward to talking to you again.
Awesome. All right, we're going to remove ourselves and add your slide.
All right, sounds great. All right, like I said, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world or when you happen to be watching this. My name is Ricardo Torres. I am the Chief Engineer of Open Source and Cloud Native at the Boeing Company, and I have the honor of serving as the company's governing board rep for the CNCF. I love virtual events like CubeCrash, not just because I get to sleep in my own bed, but also because I truly feel it helps folks participate and attend who might not otherwise be able to. A couple of weeks ago, I was one of about 5,000 people lucky enough to attend a talk by the incomparable Dr. Jane Goodall. She essentially greeted us in chimpanzee. Unfortunately, I'm not that cool. Worse, I sourced this word cloud from the internet, so here's to hoping it's entirely appropriate. I can only read some of these. Like I said, I'm Ricardo Torres. I should also say I'm a career software engineer and I love software. I also love security, truly. I've definitely butted heads with some of my security engineers over the years, but that's only because I'm passionate about it. A few weeks back, Chris Short, Senior Developer Advocate at AWS, recommended speakers and upcoming events share this important message. So before I go any further, and if you take nothing else away from my talk today, please remember the old Kubernetes registry is frozen, is deprecated, and as of the 20th of this month has started redirecting. So if you have network restrictions in place and your polls started failing recently, this might be why. Also, that redirect is temporary and it will go away at some point. So even if your polls are still succeeding, you need to make sure you're pointing at the right registry to ensure continued operations. Please, please, please. All right, back to KubeCrash. I want to start with a little personal philosophy. I firmly believe understanding your why will provide you clarity. This is Simon Sinek with one of his books, Start With Why. There's also a TEDx talk you can find out there if that's more your speed. I'll admit, I've not actually read the book, but I have seen the talk. Sorry, Simon. I think a lot of folks focus on how why can be used externally. Start with why to sell this, or start with why to motivate other people to do that. I like to focus on why internally. You need to motivate yourself as well. Anyone who's ever had trouble picking up a new habit can likely attest to that. I know I often think back to my whys. But we've known this in software for a long time. Do you remember how you're supposed to write a user story? The whole as a, I want to, so I can. That last bit, the so I can part, is the why of the user story. I think it's the most important part. So we've been talking about why in software for a while. I just want to bring your attention to it. Today, you're going to hear some great speakers talking about security. I'm also going to talk a tiny bit about security, but before I do that, let me tell you a bit about our why. Check this out. This is a rendering of the Sustainable Flight Demonstrator. The United States Aviation Climate Action Plan has an objective of achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2050. NASA, the US's National Aeronautics and Space Administration, recently awarded this project to Boeing. So Boeing is going to be working with NASA to produce a more sustainable airliner. I think that's pretty cool. But here, let me give you a different angle. It wasn't readily apparent in that last shot, and I'm not an aerospace engineer, but this thing is intended to have a transonic truss-braced wing, extra long, thin, and stabilized with those diagonal struts. As I understand it, those wings are key to reducing drag and increasing fuel efficiency. I'm not even an aviation nerd, and this thing has me about ready to geek out. But wait, what does that have to do with Boeing's why? I know, you get it. Boeing builds airplanes. Well, the software controlling commercial aircraft is an example of high integrity software. So what's that? Well, Richard Bellairs has described it like this on the Perforce blog, but I'm going to paraphrase for my needs. Basically, high integrity software does what it's supposed to do and only what it's supposed to do. That's the kind of thing that keeps security folks up at night. Remember that Mark Andreessen quote, software is eating the world? Well, if software is eating the world, then every company is essentially a software company. If you're a software company, I contend you're at least a little bit of a security company. And if you're writing high integrity software, it's a little more than a little bit. I didn't phone a friend or anything, but public sources tell me the 787 has something like 7 million lines of high integrity code. I've written on a few 787s, and I'm very happy we take the security of that code seriously. I bet you are too. The 787 is my current favorite commercial airliner, but maybe my next favorite will utilize lessons we learned from the sustainable flight demonstrator. But it's not just airplanes. Hopefully most of you recognize the International Space Station. Actually, I'm going to pause here just for a moment so I can look at the picture because I love this picture. I love everything about like this. Every time I see the station, it just blows my mind. Boeing built significant portions of this amazing station. Its first component was launched in 1998 and has been continuously occupied since the 2nd of November in the year 2000. The current plan is for it to remain in service through 2030 with a plan to deorbit it in 2031. Here's a screen cap of Boeing's Space Launch System website. Boeing is one of the many organizations contributing to the Artemis missions, taking humanity back to the moon, to Mars, and hopefully one day beyond. I know I already brought up space, but I just couldn't help myself. I might actually get more hyped about real space than science fiction. And if you know me, that's saying something. We also do work in satellites and some other really cool work in space, but maybe I've already lingered too long. I appreciate your indulgence. Okay, so doubtless you knew about air, maybe you knew about space, but how about sea? This is a picture of the Wave Glider from Liquid Robotics, a Boeing company. This platform set the Guinness World Record for the longest single mission for an unmanned autonomous surface vehicle. In a little over a year, it traveled about 14,703 kilometers autonomously. And yeah, you heard me right, I said surface vehicle. The surface component you can see in the background of this picture is actually a little over 3 meters long. It has a computing environment, solar modules, batteries, varying communications equipment, and still has room for configurable sensors. The submersible component actually captures and transfers wave motion into forward motion. There are other details here, and I'm not doing it justice, but I hope you get the idea. Oh, and also, the Wave Glider was originally invented to record the singing of humpback whales without harming the environment or disrupting the whales. So now I've been able to work in one of my favorite animals and space. Those are some cool domains. We've talked from nearly seabed to space, but now I want to talk a little about things that don't primarily operate in the physical world. Here's a couple of types of things I've worked on throughout my career. Both of these. Maybe you're working on things that fly through the air or space or can stay out at sea for months, but that's not something I'm usually involved with. I mean, sometimes I get frustrated with some code and want to toss my laptop across the room or out the window, but I don't think that counts. And don't get me started on troubleshooting a CI/CD pipeline. So maybe your experience is more like mine. I've written monoliths and microservices and migrated from one to the other. I've done it on-prem and in the cloud. I've done test-driven, domain-driven, event-driven, front-end, back-end, you name it, maybe I've done it. Maybe you have too. Maybe that's more like what you're doing. But wait, how's that high integrity? I get it. Not everyone's writing software for hardware platforms from seabed to space. Let's revisit Richard Bellaire's definition. I have to admit, I kind of tried to trick you. I insinuated, and many people think, high integrity is really only applicable in safety critical applications. Nope, sorry about that. I'm sure if you stopped to look through this list, you and your boss would like these qualities from every piece of software you write. So let's do that real quick. High integrity software is software that does what it should, can be tested, has security features, lacks known security vulnerabilities, is easy to understand, and is easy to edit and upgrade. Thanks, Richard. So when you're building for the literal clouds, high integrity has to be top of mind. When you're writing software for something that has to fly incredible distances for decades, the why of your security is hopefully self-evident. This is the flight path of the last 747 delivered, flown safely. Jinnah Hossain, our VP of software, had this to say about high integrity software. High integrity software defines its behaviors and is defended against misbehaviors. The cloud native ecosystem allows us to extend high integrity concepts to utility computing. Right? So he points out the cloud native ecosystem allows us to take high integrity concepts into new domains. I think it's an almost perfect match. When I start thinking about concepts like GitOps and immutable infrastructure and how we're using them, I get excited about a safer, a higher integrity future. And this is something we're taking seriously. Earlier, I mentioned I'm on the governing board of the CNCF. That's because Boeing joined the CNCF as platinum members. We understand the importance of the cloud native ecosystem, and we put our money where my mouth is. We love doing work that matters in the best way possible. That means taking high integrity with us into all we do, including cloud. Like these clouds, one of Boeing's domains. Actually, this is an AI-generated image. I sure hope the folks working on those models are working towards high integrity software, but that's probably for another talk. Now here's everyone's favorite eye chart, or at least my favorite eye chart. Maybe this looks more like your cloud. I know it looks more like mine. These are the kinds of tools I use to deliver high integrity solutions. Maybe you're doing something similar. Maybe you work for a financial institution, maybe you're processing customer payments, maybe you have health data, or maybe just user credentials or other user data. Maybe you focus on the front or the back end, doesn't matter. All of those and plenty besides are examples of software you should be making high integrity. I know if my data is running through it, I hope you are. I've had the privilege to speak with people looking at putting OCI containers in the oceans, in space, and even throwing Kubernetes on something like a Raspberry Pi and having it fly through the air. I love hearing about those less than normal deployment scenarios. I mean, anyone can deploy to a hyperscaling public cloud, am I right? Kidding, just kidding. But if you've got a great story about an awesome deployment, I'd love to hear it. Like I said, I'm a software dev. Maybe you're not. Maybe you help build platforms or infrastructure. Maybe you're a leader or manager. Maybe you're in security or quality assurance or any of 100 other roles. Regardless, if you're helping with the creation of software, you should be helping to create high integrity software. And don't just think about security in a production environment. The integrity of your software starts before the first line of code is written. Your design has to allow for high integrity. Your build environments have to ensure high integrity. Your deployed environments have to be configured for high integrity. And yes, the code you write has to be written to support high integrity. It's a high bar, but don't let that stop you. Speaking of getting stopped, this is me, right after I got hit with a live electrical wire, dropping me, and my brothers and friends picking me back up. See, this is a lot like security. First, it's not a sprint. I think we were 17 clicks into this particular obstacle course race. Second, there are a bunch of obstacles and they're spread out, and you might get a little beat up along the way. But also, sometimes you're going to have to pick each other up or be picked up. Security is a team sport. I already said I've butted heads with some of my security friends over the years, but I know they were always trying to do the very best for the company and our customers. Let's try to leave behind the idea InfoSec just wants to tell you no. I think I read somewhere in the last year or so, there was something like 3 million unfilled cybersecurity roles. Keep that in mind too. Our friends in security might be stretched. Do your part. It's important. Okay, well, you got to hear a little about my philosophy, a little about Boeing's why, some of the domains we operate in, and hopefully you're ready to do your part on the obstacle course. So as you listen and learn from the folks today, I implore you, think back to your why. Security isn't always easy. Few parts of software are. But I think if you know your why, if you understand your why, you'll be better motivated to see it through. So if you hear about something exciting today and you end up trying it, when you hit your first obstacle, think back to your why and push through. But again, if you only remember one thing, it's that you should be using the new registry. Good luck on your journey through cloud, security, and software. I hope you have a great Cube Crash experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that talk. That was so interesting. And I just want you to know that I've considered doing a Tough Mudder before, and I will not after knowing that you can get electrocuted. Like, hard no. Thanks for that.
That actually, you can pass any of the obstacles, so just keep that in mind.
That probably wasn't even the worst thing that happened, I'm guessing.
Yeah, on that particular run, I actually broke a rib. So yeah, that was not the worst thing.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
So, moving on from something I'm never doing.
Something a little bit more safe, like open source.
So I think if first of all, if anybody has any questions, like please put them in the chat and we will bring them up. You had the screenshot of your cloud and all the different technologies, and that is the lovely CNCF landscape image, and it's really busy. So I'm curious if there's any open source tech that you are really excited about right now. Maybe because you're using it personally. It doesn't have to be a Boeing endorsement by any means, but like, what makes you excited?
Yeah, I, like everybody else, I'm really excited right now about the promise of WebAssembly, the security constraints that it brings to the table for a serverless workload, server-side workloads in general. Similar story on eBPF, the performance possibilities and the new avenues to explore existing capabilities, whether it's things like service meshes or just observability in general. Right? There's just a lot to explore there. And so I'm excited about all those things. Like I also mentioned in my talk, right? So GitOps, I'm just a big fan. And then immutable infrastructure, I think is another thing where we can take that even further.
Awesome.
We might be hearing a little bit more about service mesh later in the program, one in particular.
So I do have another question that we were chatting about as a team earlier. It's really, really cool that Boeing has, you in your position running open source, endorsing cloud native. So are there things that you're doing at Boeing to encourage your organization to give back to or contribute to projects?
Yeah, so we set up a brand new open source program office. So there's a team there that we work together. And so we actually recently announced that we had basically greenlit or maybe made it easier for our engineers to contribute to graduated and incubating projects of the CNCF.
Mm-hmm.
It's always been a process that we've had internally for folks to individually do that, but now we've kind of created a blanket process for all of those projects. And so we're trying to remove any kind of roadblocks from folks directly contributing.
That's really exciting.
And Frederick, while he's sorting out his power issue, sent in a question, just curious if you were involved with the open source security to help with the software supply chain.
So that's definitely near and dear to our heart. So we are talking to the OpenSSF right now to try and figure out what makes the best sense for us as an organization. So I actually met Frederick at the Cloud Native Security Con recently in Seattle. So it's definitely near and dear to my heart. I have a background in cybersecurity, so that's something that I spend a lot of time thinking about.
Very cool.
Awesome. Now, will you be heading to Amsterdam in a few weeks?
I do have the pleasure of going to Amsterdam in a few weeks. It's one of the joys of being on the governing board.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any talks coming up? Anything you want to give a little shout out to?
Nothing on the calendar right now.
Okay. Well, for anybody who's going to be in Amsterdam, I do have to say, if you see Ricardo, just stalk him a little bit, ask him questions, because I know I learned a lot from you at the KubeCon in Detroit. So thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you spending the morning with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ricardo.